Mute. City Council meeting for April 12th, 2022 of the Coburg City Council at 7 o'clock. This meeting is in person and Zoom. To participate by Zoom, you needed to pre-register by 3 p.m. the day of the meeting. There will be an opportunity for the public to provide testimony if you are signed up during citizen testimony. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed. We stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible. Roll call, Sammy.
Councilor Fox. Councilor Connell, there's a point.
Sammy. There's comments. Again, I'm just going to keep reminding us this city is very, very busy. Our staff has a huge amount of projects, as you can see from our project list that we're including. Some of those are going on right now and others are in the future. It's a pretty big lift for our little city. So one of the things that I ask councilors to be aware of now is, as we ask our staff to do things, we're probably going to have to ask them not to do something else, because that's how busy they are. So if we start thinking about a project that we want to put upon our staff, we need to think about a project that we're going to take off of their plate.
These are the red folders for you. I just want to kind of go through them in order. Agenda item number 4, we're going to pull the March 8th minutes. They'll come back. For agenda item 1, 2, 3, and 5. And we approve the consent agenda, and the minutes will be moving off of it. Agenda item number 8, for resolution 2022-10. Not all of the packet material wasn't complete. I left. Also labeled the pop-up ones, you can insert them into the packet.
Forward. Citizen testimony. During the citizen testimony, members of the public may speak about any topics except items scheduled for a public hearing at the same meeting. The speaker would wait until that hearing, or items that are not public matters, or items that relate to a quasi-judicial land use matter that may or will be decided by council. And I will remind everybody to respect the fact that our agenda item for the annexation is a quasi-judicial meeting. So we cannot take public input on that. Is there anyone signed up to provide citizen testimony?
No.
Thank you. Consent agenda. We have the minutes of the February 8th, 2022 City Council meeting, minutes of the February 22nd, 2022 City Council and Planning Commission joint work session, and minutes of the February 22, 2022 special City Council meeting. Minutes of the March 8th in the original agenda have been removed and will be held later. And the minutes of the March 29, 2022 City Council work session Any corrections or questions regarding Counselor Lehman?
Just one minor one on page 3 of the February 8th minutes. At the top under number 3, the fourth line down, Counselor McConnell questioned if Pacific Source was sent a letter to express employee concern, etc. That was my comment. I think Ms. McConnell's comment was more along Pacific Source was very good reputation, longstanding in the community, but the one in the minutes was my question.
Okay, Counselor McConnell to Counselor Lehman.
I will remind the counselors that we can remove any of these items from the consent agenda upon request. Are there any such requests? None, I'll entertain a motion for the consent agenda.
Accept the consent agenda as presented,
As amended.
as amended.
Motion by Counselor Fox, second by Counselor Berry. Where did that come from? Okay. To approve the consent agenda by Counselor Fox and a second by Counselor Blaine. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Special guests, Sim? Thank you. And item number 6. The council will now conduct the second reading of ordinance A 200-J, an ordinance annexing territory to the city of Coburg identified as tax lot 00202 of assessors map 16-03-34-00 and consisting of 107.43 acres and amending ordinance A 200-G to change the Coburg zoning map to rezone said territory from Lane County zoning district exclusive farm use labeled E40 to Coburg zoning district light industrial and adopting a severability clause. Staff report.
Good evening, members of the council, mayor. I'm Ann Davies, in case you've forgotten who I am. Forgive me if I'm a little out of practice. I haven't done this in 2.5 years or so. So as the mayor mentioned, the annexation and zone change before you is a quasi judicial matter. That's kind of a legal term, but essentially it means that you're kind of acting sort of like a judge, which is unusual for city councils to act that way. The reason it's significant is that as a quasi judge, you have to be neutral in your decision, and the requirement that you be a neutral decision maker is what triggers the requirement to disclose ex parte contacts. So as a judge, you couldn't be having conversations with the parties that wasn't during the trial. So I want to take this opportunity. You've disclosed ex parte contacts in the past, but I think that was like in January or something. So some time has passed. I want everyone to either say they have nothing to disclose or disclose any conversations that they've had from the time that they previously disclosed until tonight. Ex parte contacts, by definition, don't include anything that's not substantive. So if you have a discussion with somebody that's about the process or the hearing is tonight or something that doesn't touch on the substance of the decisions that you're going to make, then it's not even ex parte contact. You don't have to disclose it. If you have a question, err on the side of disclosing. So what you need to do is you need to say, yeah, I've had an ex parte contact, and this is basically just summarize the substance of what that conversation was. So we can go through and maybe just the people who have something to disclose. I don't know, however you want to do it, Mayor.
I'll just start and say that I have no further ex parte contacts than the ones I previously registered last year. And we can start down here. Councilor McConnell.
And I have had no ex parte other than the ones that I previously. Thank you for the explanation.
Okay, sure.
So I may have had potential ex parte communication, and out of the abundance of caution, I want to disclose it. It was at our finance audit committee, and I was asking the finance director a question. And the question was, if we knew what the water consumption revenue and or proposed quantity of use was going to be with the proposed development of a bottling company. Not sure if it's a communication because there was no answer, number one. And number two, it wasn't with the public, but it was at a council subcommittee meeting, but it does have some communication that the other councilors weren't privy to, which is what I understand
Right.
could be one of the elements.
So I've never really done it this way, but if anyone else had some question about the, more detail of the substance, you could have some discussion about it, but I think that's probably sufficient at this point.
Councilor Blunt?
I've just had more of what you described as far as like the meetings coming up. We've got our first, we're having our.
Councilor Bell?
No ex parte contact.
Councilor Alexander?
Nothing to disclose.
And Councilor Fox?
No ex parte con.
Okay. We're good to move forward then. Thank you for taking the time to do that. I know it's sometimes seems kind of silly, but there could be those communications in between the time that you previously made that. So the second thing I want to talk about is more of a process issue also about the where we are with the record. I think you're all aware that there was written communication that came in after the deadline for that particular communication. It was an opponent who submitted something on April 1st, which was a week past the date when that submittal needed to have been made. It was not forwarded to you because staff didn't feel like it was appropriate for you to be looking at it because it had been clearly determined by the council what was allowed and what wasn't allowed. So I just wanted to be clear that wasn't presented to you, and just explain again that the applicant always has the final rebuttal because they have the burden of proof. So they are always the one who has the last word. So the opponent sometimes, feels not fair in a way, but it's because of that burden of proof, and the applicant has to have that last say. And then as far as just the staff report on the substance of this annexation and zone change, Henry Hurley did a tremendous job up until this point, preparing staff reports for previous meetings. The staff report for tonight is basically the findings that are proposed to be attached to the ordinance. Not going to go through them. You guys are way more familiar with the substance even than I am because I'm coming into it new. But the staff report, the findings, I should say, do a really good job of explaining what all those arguments were that came in even during the open record period, and explaining how the findings come to be positive findings based on the criteria, notwithstanding what those arguments were during the open record period and the other issues that were raised during the process. I think that's all I have as far as the staff report. So if you have any questions of me, I think a lot of the substantive stuff, Sammy and Ann are actually more familiar with it than I am, but I will try to answer any kind of legal questions that anyone might have. I'm sure there'll be something coming up.
Okay, we've had, I believe, 7 public meetings regarding this, and includes work sessions and actual public hearings. So I think we're pretty well versed in it. What I want to do is call for the motion, and then we'll do a roundtable to allow each person here, each counselor and myself to argument or debate or discussion from their point of view, and then we'll call for a vote. have a motion? Mr. Blaine?
To adopt ordinance A 200-J, an ordinance annexing territory to the city of Coburg identified as tax lot 00202 of assessors map 16-03-34-00 and consisting of 107.43 acres and amending ordinance A 200-G to exchange the Coburg zoning map to rezone said territory from Lane County zoning district exclusive farm use E-40 to Coburg zoning district light industrial and adopting a severability clause.
I second.
Motion by Counselor Blaine and second by Counselor Lehman. We'll do a round table. Started with Counselor McConnell last time, so we'll go to the right. Start with Counselor Fox. Would you like to make any statement or discussion?
No. My statements, I noted, I pulled out the line thing about just looking at some nuances in the commercial district code. My laser focus, but there'll be some dusting up.
Be determined later. Thank you, Counselor Fox. Counselor Alexander.
I don't have much else to say. I'm not excited about this at all, and I haven't been since day one. I understand why you want it. I understand that it'll bring more money to our city, as you two have put it. But it does bring upon some change that I'm not excited about. I've talked to you enough, and I've heard enough to know where this is going, so I just stop there.
Counselor Bell.
I'd like to acknowledge that this is not an easy decision to make when we talk about growth and change. But I too have studied this and pondered this, and being a farm girl growing up, I like my open spaces, but I'm also aware that the change, the annexation and the change in the zoning, in my opinion, is needed to maintain and improve the city function.
I know I've made the statement before, but I actually got involved in city government to stop growth. That was 34 years ago. In many ways, growth can be a good thing. I've had so many people come to me lately and say that Coburg has been as good as it's ever been. And I believe that. That happened because of growth, because we got good neighbors, because we planned well. Nothing's perfect though. And one of my biggest concerns with this is being a concerned citizen when we were going through urban growth expansion plans and going through a $30 million investment into a sewer plant and the system. Counselors 10, 14 years ago were looking at that $30 million bill and said, this town can't afford that. And unfortunately, that's just the plain truth. And the way to deal with it was to swallow the bitter pill and say we have to grow so that we can increase our tax base, increase our users, so the fees don't fall all upon us. And so I think the strongest argument for it for myself, and I hope for other people, is in the staff statement under industrial policy number 9 on page 51 of the staff report. It's actually page 20 of the staff report, 51 of the council packet. Future users, I'm quoting here, the future users are part of the equation that is paying for the construction of the capital projects. Failure to develop the subject property puts in jeopardy the city's ability to maintain an affordable water rate of no more than $53.54 per 7,500 gallons base rate. Going on further, the responsibility of paying capital debt for critical wastewater facilities is placed on the current users as well as projected future users. The city council recognizes in this statement that the financial commitment to the water master plan and wastewater capital improvement plan anticipates, plans, and projects growth in the city. Development on the east side of Interstate 5 and on the subject property was very much part of that projection. So our financial projections on paying these bills and being able to keep our monthly bills down includes this development, any potential development coming in there. That concerns me that if we don't have that development, I know what's going to happen. Our bills are going to go up. And I suspect that's a substantial part of that financial planning, not just a couple dollars a month. So that's my biggest concern. Since then, I have been, from day one when I got in as mayor, worked very hard on trying to get our zoning and our development ordinances so that we had control of what comes in. I think we've done a good job. We're still working on it. We're still learning, but I think we have a good process. And I think we can safely project that we're going to get some good development because of that. Thank you.
Yeah, I would certainly echo what Councillor Bell said. It's a tough decision for all of us. But ultimately, I think it definitely comes down to that future growth and alleviating that pressure off of our citizens, which is very important. It's already expensive to live here. To continue that and throw another, $5, $10, $15 at their water bill would be tough. So I'm excited about it. I think as time goes on, I think we'll show that it's the right decision for the city long term, and I'm looking forward to seeing the process and being a part of it moving forward. So yeah, that's all I have. Thank you.
Councilor Raymond.
Yes, I'm supportive of the motion. I understand better the master plan process and how that plays into the future development and gives the city some more protections and guidance of the development and to address some of the concerns that the industrial model has versus the campus model. I would like us to address at some point the water potential usage and capacity. If we ever were to have a shortage, and that was a question that came up at one of our previous meetings, would there be any priority for residences over businesses if there ever became a shortage because of a business utilizing water consumption maybe greater than what our capacity was? And if for some reason the water tables changed and the amount of water available became more critical. So I am, because of that, supportive of this motion.
I understand Councillor Alexander's position, and I find myself in a similar feeling. I do understand the need for more revenue. I understand the need to move forward as a community. I am concerned about the strength of some of our codes as we've addressed some of the concerns, Councillor Fox and his light issues. We have concerns with the industrial street that's already in our community as far as lighting, noise, and noxious fumes. There are still complaints out there that I am concerned that our codes are not strong enough to support something like this development. And I find myself really struggling with this.
Listed three things: lighting and fumes, and what was the other concern?
Noise.
Oh, interesting. Any follow-ups from counselors?
I would follow up Councilor McConnell's comments, and that is why I bring up the lighting issue and Mr. Darnell's response that we should act quickly if we're going to make any changes. Because I'd hate to be reactionary like we were with the noise issue that we dealt with, and it was resolved, but the police were doing things that would be better done elsewhere. You know, holding up microphones at 10 o'clock.
We noted. Other responses? Call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion. I'll read the motion first. Excuse me. Motion by Councillor Blaine and a second by Councillor Lehman to adopt ordinance A 200-J, an ordinance annexing territory to the city of Coburg identified as tax lot 00202 of assessors map 16-03-34-00 and consisting of 107.43 acres, and amending ordinance A 200G to change the Coburg zoning map to rezone said territory from Lane County zoning district exclusive farm use labeled E40 to Coburg zoning district light industrial, and adopting a severability clause. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand, please.
Aye.
Aye. I don't vote, sorry. And opposed? Or
My statement, because I do have concerns about the with of our zoning. I'm concerned about the residents that at this time.
recognizing we have an abstention from Councillor, excuse me, McConnell, Councillor Alexander opposed, and the other four councillors are in favor. So it passes 4-1.
I would just like to say I appreciate all the staff input and time and the counselors' deliberations on this. It was a huge project, huge amount of time and effort.
Most definitely. And it's only just begun. Thanks to everybody. That this has been a long trudge. As the developer can attest to, he's got years into this and quite an investment, but the city has worked hard to, our staff, I really commend them to educate us on what we're dealing with and how we can deal with the issues. And of course, that's going to continue. Like I said, it's only just begun. Item number 7, resolution 2022-09, a resolution authorizing the application for street project funding to Oregon Transportation Infrastructure Bank. Yeah.
All right. Good evening. So this resolution is to approve us to apply for funding through the it's ODOT Bank is what I call it. So we've had initial conversations with them. We've talked with Business Oregon. Usually what we do is kind of a round robin with the funding agencies. And they kind of help us decide what is the best fit for us at this time for the project that we're looking for. So the agreement was that the Oregon Transportation Infrastructure Bank is the best option for us for this particular project. We are hoping to apply for $2.5 million. That is so the way it's a drawdown. So we would pay up front, and then as we pay the bills, we turn in for reimbursement and are reimbursed. So $2.5 million, and that would be the initial couple years. And then in that time, we would continue to apply for grants. We have some opportunity for grants, and there's lots of infrastructure money coming that we may be able to tap into. So at this point, we are only asking for 2.5 million. And if we get grants and we don't have to borrow it, we don't have to draw it down. So that's how much we're asking to be qualified for. So I can answer any questions that you might have.
Mr. McConnell.
Normally we do because we do it by the quarter and they return them pretty fast. They reimburse us pretty fast. So.
Questions? Counselor Fox.
So you're not asking for the entire amount because we may get grants and stuff. And if we don't, we can always ask for another drawdown.
We can ask for money if we get to year 3 and we're like, oh, we're going to have to borrow more money. Then we can do that. But we already have some grants lined up through the MPO. And we also have the STA grant that's available to us every year. We tend to only apply every other year simply because we can't get the work done. And so there are opportunities. And so we don't need to apply for the whole amount because we already do have some grants lined up. And then also the city has funds they can contribute to the project as well. We have system development charges that will qualify to be used for this. And we will have some tough funds, and taxes can all be applied to this. So we should be just fine.
Just
Elaine.
more general, I was just curious kind of when like the work would start and we'd start seeing
Sure.
that kind of start moving.
So this summer, you're going to see Roberts Road, reconstruction of Roberts Road, which is a very big project. It's probably our biggest project. Mackenzie Street right here between the park and the other side of the restaurants down to the top of the hill. You're going to see some reconstruction there. And then down by Thomas Street. So we're trying to align some street repairs with some water pieces that we know we need to take care of. So we'll see those. We'll also see some slurry seals. Brian can answer more of this, but slurry seals and some seals down starting in these neighborhoods. So we're also looking at our best streets and trying to get them treated so that they're not degrading while we're trying to fix the rest of the street. So we're trying to balance that. So we're looking to do about $50,000 per year in seals, which increases the life of the streets.
So Bill.
I don't know if you can answer this or not, Ann, and maybe we may need to defer to Brian. If there is a water backup issue on any of the designated streets for slurry seal, will that be addressed at the same time?
A water, you mean a water?
Rainwater.
Oh.
Stormwater. Yes, thank you.
Brian, are you there?
Yes.
I am. Stormwater management can happen outside of these projects. So on like McKenzie headed down to Abbey, I know that there's a couple areas there that we need to what I refer to as dredge out the existing drainage areas and reestablish the drain area on the shoulders. We've done that in other parts of town. So it's a really inexpensive fix, but it can be done after these projects are have taken place.
Okay, thank you. I would just hate to see the slurry seal disrupted because we didn't deal with the stormwater runoff. But thank you for that. Appreciate
Yep.
it.
And the way it works is, so we're balancing, just moving forward. So we have a schedule that is, some streets are in engineering 1 year and in construction the next. So every street is engineered, even if it's a seal, our engineers have their hands on it. So, so they'll be looking at the streets with Brian, and they'll be making recommendations for each street. That's why you got to keep in mind that this is projected costs, because until we have an engineer on site and actually looking at the base of a road, we're doing the very best to project what we will have to do to that road.
You know, costs keep escalating.
Yes.
Questions?
You're bad at this. How much time does it take staff to write one grant in general? And is there a way that we can talk in the future about providing some additional funding for grant writing? Because it seems like this comes up a lot where we really, but it takes so much time from staff to do the grant.
It is. And so it depends on the grant is the answer. So normally transportation, this application, which I provided you guys, it's still not done, but provided you the draft up to what we have. It was a substantial amount of time, but some grants aren't as much time. And so the MPO grants, while they take some time, they don't take as much time as other grants. And so the park grant we just issued, that was a beast. And it was a lot of work on the staff's part. So it just depends on the granting agency. Sometimes they're really quite simple and sometimes they're really difficult. We have had, we have LCOG, and we can always, so we pay LCOG, we have a contract to pay them so much a year. And for that, we get some services that are generic. And so we can call on them if we need extra staff. We've had Denise Walters help us before with the water loan application, which was a beast as well. So we do have an agency to call on for extra help if we need their help. This year, we just happened to have 3 all at the same time, and they were all pretty substantive grants. And so,
So in general, we do have a resource. with Alcon.
yes, we do have a resource to call on, and they've been very helpful in the past.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? For a motion?
Approve Resolution 2022-09, a resolution authorizing the application to the Oregon Transportation Infrastructure Bank.
A motion by Counselor Bell and a second by Counselor Alexander to approve Resolution 2022-09, a resolution authorizing the application for street project funding to Oregon Transportation Infrastructure Bank. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Resolution 2022-10, item 8 on our agenda. A resolution of the City Council of the City of Coburg adopting a capital improvement policy and project list. Yeah.
So the city has, every year in budget year, you see a list of our capital projects that we're asking to go with the budget. And in the last several years, we've done a 5-year. But the only time you really see a total list of capital projects is when we redo our SDC methodology, which is not very often, maybe 5 to 7 years. And that changes like the minute we adopted things. I mean, capital projects change. And so what I'm trying to do is put in motion policies and procedures that will stay in motion for years to come, so that the city has a process for how we do things. One of the hardest things that I had to deal with when I arrived was the projects of the city. Because if you wanted to know what they are, you could read any of all 5 documents of the master plans. And that is pretty overwhelming, and for not every staff member needs to do that, but we do need direction on these are the accepted, this is what the council said are our capital projects moving forward. And the next piece is, if something comes along that's an opportunity and it's not on this list, either it better be big enough to come to the council and ask them to adjust the project list, or wait for the next year when it's adopted annually. The other piece is, and we can't have it done now, but I've been promised it soon, is that we attach SDC availability to every one of these projects. So not every project, some projects are not eligible for SDC funds at all. Some are a portion. So staff need to know that, so that they don't charge a project. 100% of SDCs go to a project when it's really not illegal. It's not illegal. It's something that you can legally pay for. So my purpose in creating this, not just a policy, but a list, is that annually it would come to the council once a year prior to budget. And the committees, the staff will all have some input on updating this project list, and then you, the council, would adopt it. And if somebody wants to write a grant for a capital project, it needs to be on this list, so that we are not constantly trying to fix or readopt. Or so it's a really important process that I think is going to be really helpful for the city, and that it sets a precedence for how we're going to do this for years to come. And so it also allows for the council to, and staff to look and go, okay, here are all the projects the city has on its docket for the next 20 years. And so that's real clear. In your red folder, I think if you didn't get that message, that we didn't get all the pieces in. So that's divided by fund. And the street project is, as you can see, that it's pretty substantial, because every project that we have to do in the streets is on there. And we try to apply years to them, and projected costs. And then there will be another column with the SDC eligibility as soon as we can get that part done. Anyway, I just wanted to give, so what is before you is a policy that describes how this will be put together, and how it will be brought to the council annually to review and adopt. And then that will be our capital project list for the year. Can answer any questions you might have.
Some of these projects are 6 to 10 years out, and I'm assuming, a $900,000 value anticipates what the inflation would be 6 to 10 years out. I also know that as you get closer, going to adjust that. But I guess my question is, are some of these numbers calculating an inflation rate?
We do look at inflation rate. Yeah, we also look at adding in
Contingency?
engineering, and it's hard sometimes because they're so far out that, in 3 years, we'll look at it closer every year as they become closer. But if you're looking at like the sewer projects, those are, it's hard to say. It is what it is for right now.
Questions from councilors?
Impressive list. It's a overwhelming list and that just from my part.
So these are all from our capital master plans. And then, of course, the Park and Trade Committee went through and were able to put some things on the list. And so it is an impressive list. And that's why you could see if this doesn't exist, how does somebody stepping into my job or Tim's job or even Brian's job know what the work of the city is? It's very difficult. It's all up here and in 5 or 6 documents. It's very hard. And so that is my purpose for this.
It's never easy. I look at the one example in the parks, they wanted to, we have no parks in the southeast portion of the city. Well, if the opportunity ever came up that they were able to acquire land for that, if it's not on this list, we can't buy it. So, but it's in our master plan, in our parks master plan, but it wasn't on the list. So that's the kind of stuff that if you miss it and then an opportunity comes up, you've got to on top of it. Questions?
To adopt resolution 2022-10, a resolution establishing a capital improvement policy and capital project list.
I second that.
I have a motion by Councillor Lehman and a second by Councillor McConnell to approve resolution 2020-10, a resolution adopting a capital improvement policy and project list. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? This is unanimously. Staff report, city goals.
Okay, it's the end show tonight. So these are the goals that the council approved at your work session that you had. And I have made just a couple changes since you saw this. I did combine a couple projects because they were all ended up being part of the plaza project. And so the development of the plaza, those are being added to that. And then I did add the PVE water system needs to be added. We do need to look at that system and it's a long history and the council needs to hear about it. If you don't understand it now, you need to understand it. And so I really do think that in the next year, we need to discuss it. And so I have added that to the list. Other than that, I haven't made a lot of changes to the list. Let's see, I thought I changed some years. On strategic planning at the bottom of the page under complete stormwater master plan, that needs to be changed to TBD. That kind of has got pushed to the side because the water project and street projects have kind of taken the forefront, and they will be looking at stormwater with each of those projects. So that has kind of changed a little bit, but other than that, I haven't made any other changes.
Or questions for him?
One question, is Coburg Creek, is that the new development?
Mhm.
Just want to say that counselors, if not all, part of building this process where we have these goals and these tasks. And it's a lot of stuff to look at, but there's a lot of stuff going on in the city. And I like the way this works personally. And I hope we can keep going so that we all are better able to understand just what our little city is doing and what it will be doing in the future. It's process, I think with a lot of support from this council to really organize and understand. And it's a lot of work to keep up with this stuff, but I think we've got good paperwork and staff is really doing a great job presenting this stuff to us and helping us to understand it. So thank you. Questions or statements? We'll entertain a motion.
I move to adopt the preamble statement and list of work plan goals so stated in attachment A for fiscal year 2023.
Second. A motion by Councillor McConnell and a second by Councillor Blaine to adopt the preamble statement and list of work plan goals so stated in attachment A for fiscal year 2023. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Charter revision and Davies.
Evening again. So before we get started, I just wanted to summarize the documents that you have before you on this agenda item. One is the staff report, which is basically a summary of the proposed changes. The second item is the current version, clean version of the Coburg City Charter. And then the third document, it's on page 127, is kind of the legislative revisions should be showing the current version and then also the proposed changes. A correction to the first page of the staff report. I was trying to figure out how to refer to these numbers without confusing you more than necessary. I'm not sure that I did a very good job, but the staff report, which provides the summary of all the different proposed changes, the section that I've cited is the section of the current charter. The numbers you'll see in the legislative format changes, the numbers change, but I wanted to point you to the current numbering. That's a little confusing, but so just briefly, amending a city charter is not something that city councils do very often. It's kind of the constitution of the city, and it's something that has to go to a vote. So when you do it, you think about it pretty carefully and make sure that you've made the right changes, thought about it carefully, talked to everyone on the council, any citizens who care to weigh in. The main impetus for putting these proposed changes together was kind of the charter not really being consistent with the way the government runs in Coburg right now. Some of those things are, the addition of a city administrator, which was, many years ago, we hired a city administrator, but it was never put into the charter. The city attorney is not in the charter. The treasurer is in the charter, but the way the government runs now, the treasurer is kind of underneath the city administrator because there's a city administrator. So things like that they're just, we wanted to make sure that the charter was consistent with the way we're doing things. There are a few other reasons for changing that weren't necessarily the way we're doing things, but issues that we felt like could be changed in the charter that helps the government run better, not necessarily to make it consistent with what we're doing now. So as far as I'm aware, the charter hasn't been updated since 1992. So it's time we do that and make sure we keep this constitution updated. So in preparing these proposed changes, what staff did is look at this document that the League of Oregon Cities has put out, which is basically a template or a model charter that they provide for resources for cities that are looking at changing their charters. A lot of the cities around Oregon are kind of based on that model charter. So it appears that, there are a lot of cities in Oregon that have updated their charters within the last 15 years or so. Ours is a little bit longer, a little bit older. So personally, and I think city-wise, we're not necessarily a city that wants to just take a template and adopt it. I don't really believe in just adopting model codes or model charters, because the cities have their own needs and their own desires of how things are run. But it is helpful to look at that model charter for ideas of how things that can be changed, or things that we're doing well, or things that we can be doing better. So those are kind of the resources that we started with. Upward of 15 or 20 different charters from cities around Oregon to try to get ideas of ways that we can improve the charter. So I think the best way to go through this is to track through the staff report, which starts at the beginning of the charter and just walks through the different changes in the charters, unless, Mayor, you had a different idea of how to go through that. I mean, they can be clumped into issues, but I think it's just easier to go through the charter. So what I'll do is I'll just go through that and kind of explain what each change is. If we want to have deeper discussion, we can certainly do that and stop in each section and have discussions about it. This could be quick and it could go on longer than tonight, I imagine. But before we get started, I do want to point you to page 3 of the staff report, which Sammy worked to put together about the timing of any future election that might be had on these proposed changes. There is an election in August and there is an election in November, at the end of this year. The August one, as Sammy's pointed out, is an election where we would likely be the only measure on that ballot. And so Coburg would have to pay for that. And I think the estimated cost is $2,500. So you can decide whether that's something that's going to make you change your mind about the timing or not. The November one gives us a little more time to, talk about the proposed changes and have debate if that's something that the council is needing or wanting to do. And then the council final action for that November election would be before August 9th, before the council meeting on August 9th. So with that in mind, keeping in mind the timing and how much debate we would want to have before we even start the election process. So we would be putting it in front of the voters. Yeah.
Just clarification, not only does the Coburg City Charter get approved by the council, but it goes on to an election as well?
Yep.
So the council votes first and then the community elects.
It's actually just a community, I mean, Sammy can correct me, but I think it's what we do. I mean, we can start this. And so we would propose something, we put it on the ballot and they would vote on it. Once it's voted, it's done. They don't come back and you don't vote. It's the citizens who vote.
The only thing
that right?
we as a council votes on is putting it on the
Right.
ballot. All right.
But you wouldn't be voting again after.
So we're referring it to electors with the changes that we approve.
Yeah.
For them to approve or disapprove.
That you're recommending,
So
basically.
then when it goes on the August or November, and I would support the November for more discussion, but they disapprove of it, then it remains as is.
Yep. Yep. It's about that. I mean, we can also, as questions come up, we can certainly respond to them if there's any big picture questions. Okay, so probably the easiest way to go through this is to have the proposed changes and the staff report in front of you. The original charter is helpful if you just want to see a clean copy, but as we're going through it, supposedly the original charter is going to be within the proposed changes. So the first section we're looking at is section 12, which is on page 3 of the legislative format. Is everyone tracking kind of what I'm
Mhm.
suggesting? Okay. So officers, And as I mentioned, the city administrator is an officer. And so we've added the city administrator and the city attorney and taken out the treasurer for the officers that the city council can be appointing. It's just kind of to make it consistent with what we're already doing. Section 13, salaries. We had a provision in there that said elected officers shall receive no compensation for serving in official capacity. The explanation that I've given in the staff report is basically to try to open it up for folks that may want to serve who just don't have the financial means to do so. So opening it up to more citizens. Do we want to have discussions as we go, or do we want to go through it all and then?
I was just gonna comment that I think it's a good idea to just leave that to the council and not put it in there that somebody will be paid. So that discretion is there. And I know a lot of elected officials across the country are looking at pay, and more are getting paid for it because it is difficult to do this. I mean, I'm retired. Lately, I've been putting in probably 20 to 30 hours a week in this job. That there's no pay. I don't need any pay, but if somebody wanted to step forward and needed a little assistance to offset whatever their current life is, I think that's a good option.
Well, a couple of questions. One would be, in this charter, it doesn't establish what a salary would be. That would probably be left up to the city council to approve the salary. This just simply states that a salary shall or may.
Yeah.
May.
Yeah.
And so that decision is a city council decision to make whether our mayor, for example, is a paid officer.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
The other thing I was thinking was the city attorney is compensated by a personal services contract, not an employee status, but this would make he or she an officer. I wonder why a city attorney should be an officer. I would think the officers, all the other officers are employees. This would be the only officer that's not an employee. So I don't understand the reason or rationale for a city attorney to be an officer.
That's, I guess the best I'm going to be able to do on that one is the model charter has it that way, and a lot of the other cities do. But, I think in a lot of places, the city is an in-house city attorney. And so that may be a distinction. You may want to take the city attorney out as an officer. It can go either way. I see your point. Yeah.
But under this, the judge wouldn't be an officer. It's being removed.
My recommendation is that we pull together a list of questions and bring that back to the next staff report.
Okay, that'd be great. Yeah.
Isn't there
Thank you.
another
Based on
section?
options. Pardon me?
Isn't there another section that refers to how we deal with executive officers?
Mhm.
Okay, so tie that into that and see if that's.
The
I can't
judge,
remember where it is.
yeah, and this provision does have the municipal judge as an officer. Additional officers of the city may include a municipal judge, city recorder. So the judge is an officer
Oh,
here
okay. I
also.
thought this was removing them.
No.
I'm sorry. The current version of the current as removes the treasurer.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. That's an interesting question, though.
I guess, what other things define an officer? To distinguish whether an officer is, whether a position is an officer or whether the position is a personal services contract or an employment status, which it wouldn't apply there, but I think those distinctions are worth more discussion.
Section 14 has some qualifications of officers.
Section.
14. Officers have some specific restrictions. Hold office, other issues.
Well, section 14 just has the one prohibits the mayor or councillor from serving more than 8 years.
That's the only, that's what we're taking out of it. The rest of it is part of the current section 14.
Okay. But what are the qualifications of officers exist? Not on this one.
Page 130, I believe, Council Lehman.
Those qualifications deal more with whether or not they are not really qualifications as much as what they can or cannot do with regards to other positions they're serving.
I don't have a great answer other than it's very common to see in charters that a city attorney and what this is proposed, but it's something we can either talk about now or talk about next time.
I would agree with Sammy that this one, I think we want to look at what is the definition of officers and why do we need to list it in there? And then look at section 14 with the qualification of officers. Seems to be a little bit of potential conflict there.
Yeah.
Especially city attorney needing to live within the city for 12 months. It's labeled as an
Goodbye.
officer.
You have a bedroom, anyone?
I know a house for sale.
So
Yeah.
again, I agree with Sammy. We get some clarification of potential cleanup on that.
Yeah.
And what officers really are. I see we have administrative officers and then we have elected officers.
Yeah.
In this.
That's
and
what I
it
was gonna-
seems to be mixed up. a
Yeah.
little. John, I've looked through this a million times and never saw that.
So section 14, since that's the one we're looking at, we're proposing to take out that term limit. Some charters have term limits for mayors and councilors and some don't. So the proposal is to take out that limit of 8 years.
You sure?
Used to be a proponent of term limits. But society is now, it's hard to get people to step up and do this work. This is not easy stuff here. And if we've got somebody that's committed and our citizens are willing to keep electing them, that's what it's all about. If they can get elected to the position, I don't care how long they stay here, if they're doing their job. And if they aren't, I think our citizens are going to kick them out. Well, setting a term limit to me seems to be taking away the authority of our voters.
As term limits are voters' decisions.
Yes.
And I would support a paid mayor's position for Coburg.
And I support that for council and mayor, if it need be. I'm certainly not looking for a paycheck here. I think we need to look at that in the future. And this is the thing, it's been 30 years since this is updated. So we need to look 30 years ahead possibly that this is going to last.
You can get one. It's very, very small though.
I get a free hat once in a while.
That was section 14, section 15. Thinking about having the charter provide for a possible recess. So the charter basically says shall meet every month. And it doesn't really give an opportunity for a summer break or a winter break or taking recess for some other serious, important reason. So in the staff report, I've given two options. The first option would provide for 2 built-in recesses for summer and winter. The second option would allow the council to vote to take up to 2 recesses at other times. So those are kind of just 2 options to consider. I mean, there's also another universe of options that you guys might come up with, but those were just 2 that seemed to make sense.
I'll just say that I prefer option B. It gives us the choice instead of having it given to us. One of the things I look at is we have a land use issue, and we've got in the charter that it's a recess month, and we've got a timing issue with land use because there are certain time limits. And so I would end up having to call a special meeting because it was deemed a recess in December or whenever. So having the choice for our council to vote when we take those times. And also, obviously, if we have a lack of agenda items, we can do that. But I like option B personally.
Okay.
When we were a sleepy town, we did take a couple of recesses.
Yeah, and we broke the charter rules by doing it. I've broken it twice, and I was informed by our city recorder that
I had no idea. I'm learning something new.
Up to 2 recesses. I think that's a separate subsection. We're adding in, so you see option A for subsection 1, option B for subsection 1, but then we're also adding a subsection 2, which is any council meeting may be canceled. Or by
that's
emergency.
just it's one thing to have a recess, it's another thing to cancel meetings.
Okay, section 16, we have council rules, but there isn't anything in the charter mentions council rules, but it doesn't ever say thou shalt adopt council rules. So section 16 is basically a new section that says the council must by resolution adopt rules of governance of its members and meetings. So it just makes it a little more formal that we're going to adopt those. Section 20, I really hate to even talk about because it's so confusing. It's called vote required, and it's basically talking about how you look at abstain votes when they might matter. And it's the language in there is very confusing. The model charter has like a 1-sentence provision with a footnote. I don't know if they're intending for the charter itself to have a footnote or if it's just a footnote to people who are adopting the charter that attempts to explain what they're doing. But what we've decided on was to keep it simple and then attempt to explain in somewhat reasonable, simple language in the council rules what exactly that means. So we can talk about that, or we can kind of.
After reading all of the abstention articles and other issues, I think that's a wonderful idea that we do that in the rules and leave the charter just with a basic statement.
It leads out with except as the charter otherwise provides. Where in the charter does it otherwise provide?
I'm not aware that there is any place, but it's kind of a safety clause just in case there's something else that
Looking for the trap. all right.
couldn't possibly think of. Let's see. Section 21. So there's quite a bit of changes on this. Basically, I don't know if Mayor, you want to talk about this. There were some concerns about the mayor kind of having too much power. I mean, not enough and too much, not enough in some places and too much in others. So. Go ahead.
So just to address that, my thought process on this is worst case scenario, abuse of power. It has a history of it, both from administrative staff to the mayor. And sometimes they were synergistic and sometimes they were oppositional. So I've been really, I've gone back and forth, and I think actually when we first sat down 2.5, 3 years ago to talk about updating the charter, I was in favor of taking a lot of power away from the mayor. But over the years and looking back, I think strong mayors have saved this city a lot of pain and hassle. And I think with the processes that we've implemented now, where we do have rules of governance, where we do have policies and procedures on how we deal with things, and we also have a strong administrative staff that has HR support, even though it's contractual now, it's still good stuff. So I think we need to keep the mayor as a CEO, basically, ultimately responsible for the goings-ons of the staff and the city. We've already delegated a lot of that, and through contract and hopefully through charter, those positions will be solidified as far as city administrator and however we deal with the officers of city recorder, judge, and eventually city attorney. So what we're looking at is, if you get a mayor that wants to come in and he or she's got an agenda and wants to get rid of somebody, a city administrator, under the current charter, I could pretty much do that. Just say, you're out of here. And there could be a fight over it, going by our rules, but in the charter, I could do that, I believe. It's a contract, but I'm also in charge of all the other employees, according to the charter. So I could pick any one of them out and say, I want that one gone. And I just like, the goal in this was to rein that in a little bit. Well, actually a lot, rein it in, but still be ultimately responsible. And what we have now is we have a policy set up with employee policy manual, where if a department head has a problem with the city administrator and it's not, they can't work it out, I'm the next step. And that's actually happened a handful of times. And the policy that I do, and we should look at our rules of governance or other policy amendments, is I bring my president in, we sit down with the department head and the city administrator, and we iron it out. That's what we've really tried to do with this charter, was take away a lot of the vagueness and really delineate what my powers are, what the city administrator's powers are. But I also want to have that upper echelon where when a city administrator and a department head can get together on something, there is this outside resource too. Yeah, Councilor Lehman.
So refresh our memories, because I remember when I first came on the council, you were proposing significant changes in the power of the mayor, handing them over to the city administrator. So refresh us what you requested and what happened, and how does that blend with what we're discussing here now?
So right now, what we do, and Davies, correct me if I'm wrong, and both ends, through resolution, upping the contract, we delegated my powers to the city administrator. But by charter, I still hold them, but we have delegated my powers to the city administrator.
With the caveat that you can rescind that unilaterally?
Right now, the way the charter stands, yes.
Yeah,
So you've delegated it and you can undelegate it.
but what he's saying, he's taking that away, and that now he will just supervise the city administrator as well it should be, and the city administrator would supervise all the other employees.
So you're wanting to make that, like a permanent change as opposed to delegating, undelegating it.
Yeah, I want it refined, and so the mayor may delegate supervision duties set forth in subsection 3 of the city administrator and city recorder. And just be very specific to that, because the current charter, there's really no limit to what I can do in the current charter. What we have done is we built a lot of guardrails with contracts And so we're some resolutions to control what the mayor can do. You know, right now, I can't just go fire her because there's a contract that you guys approved and needs to be done.
Does that mean that you can not approve renewal of the contract though? I mean, there's a distinction between terminating employment while they're under contract as opposed to the authority to non-renew the employee either by council vote or unilaterally.
I think under the process we have right now, the council would vote on it, and that's what I wanted in the charter, because it doesn't say that in the charter. So I think we have the process done already. We just need to write it in the charter.
Yeah, that's what we did.
All right.
Yeah, I think this is one of the most important changes because this is like a board of directors and the board of director doesn't like the executive directors, manager over in the other department. So he says, get rid of them or you're out.
Right.
But there's still that power, but it doesn't rest in the mayor anymore. It rests in the city administrator.
And so the part of the power that I did want to keep was what I referred to when we dealt with president, mayor, and two administrative people in the city. I do want that. I do want that input. I want that hierarchy. But I don't want, as a mayor, to be able to say, I didn't like the way she handled that. She's out of here. Or he handled that. Get out of here.
So you still keep just the discussion mode, but not the decision mode. You still want the mayor and the president to be in consultation with the administrator and department head, iron things out. But what you're saying, as I understand, is you're extracting yourself from being the decision maker of that conflict or how it's going to be resolved.
I won't say that's 100% extracting me from being the decision maker.
So I just think that needs to be specified.
So when we made decisions, it was agreed upon by everybody, but I think that's where I see that edge that we've got to say, when it comes to the end, in my opinion, through rules and policy, the president and the mayor
And make that
would
decision.
override that.
And that, I think, should be spelled out.
Right. Whether we do that in the charter or the rules of governance. What I want to do is take away just that vague, the mayor has all power to supervise all personnel and hire and fire.
What section 12, going back to section 12, what it currently says is additional officers of the city may include the judge, the city recorder, now the city administrator, city attorney, and such other officers as the council deems necessary, each of whom shall be appointed and may be removed by the mayor with the consent of the council. That was already in there. It's just the city administrator wasn't an officer before.
Okay, but that now brings the city council in as the decider, not the mayor.
I can't make that decision without
Okay.
your support.
Okay,
But as you said, I can bring it to the council
yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
as mayor. But I can't make that final decision without your support. And that's the way I want it. I don't want a mayor being able to just arbitrarily terminate anybody. There was something else. Let's see.
In that section.
The part that concerned me and what Ann did with this, if we go back to section 20, what is now 22, mayor, section 3. Supervise all officers except the city attorney, municipal judge in their duties. Employees, agents, commissions, committees on the council shall have the power to delegate such duties of supervision to members of the council and others as the mayor may deem appropriate for effective and efficient administration of the city government. All of that that's been lined out is in her job description now in the charter. And that's the way I believe it should be.
And just historically, what happened in Coburg and what happened in a lot of cities before they started hiring city administrators is different members of the city council would be like the department heads. Like one counselor would be the head of the public works and one counselor would be, and it's just not done like that hardly ever anymore. So that's what that language that talks about supervision to members of the council was about. It's like he would delegate that to a particular council member.
And that created a lot of issues within the departments, even here in the city, when we had the assigned counselors to each department.
Well, I see the distinction that you wouldn't supervise the city attorney or the municipal judge, but you still would have the same decision-making ability to bring to the council any employee or officer or disciplinary or termination.
Not any executive officers.
So the city administrator is not an executive officer. And the municipal judge is not an executive officer.
In this, they are.
Just a little confusing for me. See the distinction between supervising city employees and city officers. But not all city officers, if they are going to be including the city attorney and a municipal judge. Correct,
Have a
but
very different
Yeah.
function.
Yeah.
Within the city. If you look, in my opinion, if you look at the judge, I can't say whether or not that judge, I couldn't discipline that judge. That's sort of a higher power. There are other judicial branches that, or boards that do that. It looks very different to me when I look at an attorney or I look at a judge than patients on a.
I'm just trying to get clarity about which people are in which bailiwicks in terms of,
Maybe that's
Executive
another thing we
officer.
need to bring back if we're gonna move forward
And,
with this.
and I think there needs to be clarification of under there, section 3, it says supervise all officers. And then the new sections, mayor may delegate supervisional duties set forth in section 3. City administrator or city recorder.
Well, we're talking about you get rid of the judge and you get rid of the city attorney. You have the city recorder and the city administrator and other officers that you may in the future decide to make officers. So I think what you're saying is you don't want the mayor delegating the supervision of the officers. You're wanting to delegate only supervision of people under the city administrator, right?
I think
When we
that
originally
sounds,
discussed
yeah.
it, that was
Yeah.
what we were going for.
Isn't the idea is the city administrator is the head of the hierarchy, and then we have control of the city administrator as a council. The mayor can step in and say, so-and-so's, this isn't working, we need to talk about this. I mean, isn't that the whole idea? Is to like give.
the word flow chart comes to
The
mind.
officers have to-
It's a buffer
at the buffer.
to the issue of a city administrator. So we have the rogue mayor who wants to come in and fire everybody. Well, we have a city administrator that wants to fire everybody. And everything's apparently going fine. Again, that's where I think the mayor, hopefully with a president or somebody else that steps in to help buffer that and deal with that issue, have power to deal with that issue, but not to the point that we're reaching down into department heads and others.
The only way we set it up in the ordinance, I'm sorry, my computer. My direct supervisor is Damon. The only time that I would be able to, as an officer, to go above that would be going through the process and challenging it, and it just basically let me have an executive session with you. My side of the story and not.
That's where the officer's description needs to be, is because what that does is before we lose one of those officers for whatever reason, the mayor becomes involved.
Operation or grievance
Right.
procedure.
I guess I don't have any particular bent on which way it should be. I just think it needs to be really well clarified as the duties, the supervision, and how supervision is different from disciplinary action, for example, in terms of being initiated by the supervisor. Are you simply supervising, or are you in effect having a different role, including supervision, which entails termination or non-renewal, which I guess what you also said, this comes to the council anyway.
That would be in the rules, right? Versus like Sammy said, we have an ordinance already, and I think that needs to be part of what this discussion is, because supervising all officers and then immediately delegating them in the charter seems to be pretty redundant.
On a clarification on what the office. Some other strong mayors can have what officers they offer.
It'd be better to define what supervisor.
Yeah, supervision
Right, and the
versus.
interaction for the mayor and the supervisory role.
Yes.
Bright light, low light.
We want to move on from that?
Yeah. Yes.
Please. Okay, we're on page 133 of the packet. It says section 24, but the staff report refers to it as section 23. City administrator. So this is basically the next 3 or 4, the 3 sections are basically putting in the city administrator, the city recorder, and the city attorney, separate sections for those officer positions. And it's briefly spelling out what they are and what they do.
In the amended section 254, city recorder, the book is still mentioned.
Oh,
A book.
keep an accurate.
Keep an accurate record of its proceedings in a book provided for that purpose.
Were we just gonna take that whole phrase out?
We gotta move into the 22nd century.
Right?
Is it
So
leather
keep an
bound?
accurate record of its proceedings.
I have, yes, yes.
I would have one suggestion on section, I guess it's now 24. The city administrator has the experience and qualifications necessary to manage the city. I would add an authority. City administrator has the experience, qualifications, and authority necessary to manage the city. Because really,
I don't
Has the
think that
experience
that
and quali-
belongs there.
simply to say the city administrator has the experience and qualifications necessary to manage the city.
I think the role of the city administrator the authority is in a different section.
Yeah,
I would just take out that second
It
sentence.
almost doesn't mean anything.
it does not,
Yeah.
it shouldn't be there, it should be, that's like the job application.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
That whole first.
The second sentence.
Second sentence.
Thank you.
It's called a contract.
Then subsection 1 under there, Henry helped me with this and we kind of brainstormed. We were struggling with subsection 1 because the sections 20, 24, 25, 26, or whatever they're numbered are basically, this is the position and this is what they do. That subsection 1 under the city administrator is kind of more council rule-y. You know, it's like telling the council what they can and can't do. So I think I would propose taking that out and putting it in the council rules. If that's makes sense to everybody.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, the next substantive one is vacancies in office, which is on page 134 of the packet. And it's on the, actually 135. So the explanation that I gave in the staff report is that the current charter makes a distinction between excused and unexcused absences from council meetings. Provides that 4 consecutive unexcused absences provide a basis for removal from office. The proposed language removes the excused, unexcused distinction. It would provide that a councilor or mayor's office would become vacant if they miss 2 council meetings in 60-day period, or if they miss 4 council meetings in a 12-month period. The idea is that whether the absences are excused or not, if a counselor cannot regularly attend the meetings, then the seat should be filled by someone who could attend. So it just kind of making that a little bit more strict.
Going with this, what this does is instead of just having a solid charter line that says, if you miss this many, you're out of here. What happens is if somebody misses, according to this, 2 meetings, and the charter says you're out of here. There's no vote, discussion, there's nothing. It's just you're out of here. And that requires us to go through the process of filling that seat again. So I wanted this to have the vote of the council as the final say. It lays the guidelines for it, but the council votes. And that to me takes away the excused, unexcused. It's just up to the council so that they can have the facts to make the decision. Agree with that? So again, just because you did miss 2 meetings within 60 days, that doesn't mean you're out. You come in and your case, I guess, and take a vote of the council before it would be vacated.
Between council, that would be. Please consider this.
I don't want to get too specific in a charter that 10 years from now, you're talking about something that doesn't even exist possibly, but I think the rules of governance, but I think just relying on council to be human and accept that everybody's human and take the vote.
I could possibly see including or distinguishing between being in the council meeting in person versus by phone. Not make any distinction.
Again, I think that could be described in the rules of governance, but if you're on phone, by law, you're attending the meeting.
I could see somebody that have a physical, medical reason
Yeah.
why they couldn't attend.
There's lots of different
Yeah.
ways.
With the new COVID law, they just passed it. We have to provide that opportunity for them to attend that way.
And the public to provide.
Yeah.
Either Zoom or just phone.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't be driving. Life is funny.
But if you're in a Tesla, it's okay, because you.
Who knows in
That
30
last
years?
line- I'm sorry.
Who knows in 30 years, what, we're saying we're all human, but in 30 years, we might not all be human.
Yeah, that's true. So again, that last line in that section, any vacancy shall become effective upon declaration of such vacancy by the majority vote of the city council. That's to avoid the next section, filling vacancy.
So we're getting rid of excuse and excuse absences.
Yes, I hope.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, so the next one is mode of enactment, which is on page 136, and it's on subsection 5, and this is just something that Sammy alerted us to that just isn't done, so we took it out, the and within 3 days thereafter, the mayor shall endorse it and date it. It's about signing ordinances, which doesn't happen that way, so we took that out. And then the page 137, section 37 is a new section that is taken, it was this weird provision in the charter that mentioned a previous charter provision, but the language wasn't included. So what we're doing is we're taking that absent language that's cross-referenced, but the language isn't there, and putting it in the section, adding a section that actually has the language, so we know what we're talking about. And then the repeal of previously enacted provisions takes out that confusing language. I probably just made that way more confusing, but that's because you just know what it's about. So that takes care of 37 and 39. And then the last one is not a change here. It's the time of effective charter. The charter currently says this charter shall take effect immediately upon voter approval, which is a fine way of doing it. But what I saw in some of the other charters is that they actually had a date, whatever that vote is. I mean, they know what the vote's going to be, what date the vote's going to be held on. So they say, for instance, like August 9th, this charter becomes effective on August 9th, which is the vote of. So the only reason I'm saying that is that I like to know what the date is. Like, when did this charter become effective? It says, oh, well, it became effective upon voter approval. Well, who knows when the voters approved it? So I think my suggestion would be to have a date and then have a parenthesis that says that's the date of the vote. That's just a suggestion.
Can't you just put that as a footer, like the revision date, or?
First of the month following voter approval, December.
Voter approval. It's an election that we're signed up. Voter approval on the November 7th. Yeah.
Something like that.
As long as they're not hanging chads.
Yeah, I mean, we can bring it back with 2 different options, but that would be my preference.
Mayor possibly.
What are you thinking? Oh, we can talk
Well,
about it later.
yeah, the terms, or they being elected under the 92 charter, it's gonna be one of those.
That effective date might be really important.
It might be.
I think you could make the effective date a week later to maybe resolve some of those questions. I don't know. Okay, so that's all I have. I mean, it sounds like what we'll do is come back with some more revisions, suggestions, and discussion.
It sounds like we're putting this on the November.
Yeah.
ballot.
Yeah. Maybe $2,500.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you.
those of you that don't know, this has actually been going on for 3 years, just back and forth notes on this charter. And it still goes on.
Because we struggle to get it exactly right.
Well, COVID may have displaced a little bit of that, but we truly have been off and on. We pull it off the shelf for 3 years. We've been trying to figure out how to make this work. So, and as we've moved along, we've changed our minds a lot on what we were gonna do with it. Okay, is there any other final statements or questions on the charter? Thank you. Finance monthly report, item 11. Any questions for Tim on the finance report? Yep, statement?
Not really, no, I was just
Just a
gonna say,
written one?
if you have any
Yeah,
questions, I'd be
okay.
happy to
I don't
answer
know
them.
if it's quarterly or not.
Yeah, it'll be next time.
Following
Counselor
up
Lehman?
what we did discuss at Finance Audit Committee, has there been any discussion what the proposed revenue will be from the bottling company?
Ann and I had a discussion about it, but you want to talk about that a little bit?
They have any second applications in the pipeline?
We're gonna find out real soon. Yeah.
Any other questions?
You forget the comparison of the budget.
You bet. Got some good responses, so
Yeah, the charts are really nice.
great. I'm glad they worked.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Administrative monthly update. Questions for Ann or department heads? You have a.
No? Council, if you want to attend that meeting and hear what Faye Stewart has to say, you should let Sammy know. So in the event that 3 or 4 of you want to be there, that she's aware of that.
I mean, I'm there as liaison.
I have a question on the park grant. What's your feelings about our chances of getting it? I heard through the grapevine that there were more submissions than what we thought were coming through, and then it was.
Well, there always is more than there is money available. It's competitive. We have a very good grant. We have match, we went through the process of getting the property, and there's a donation with that property. Citizens have put together the plan, and we have all of the right pieces in the plan that is supporting the SCORP. So if we don't get funded, it's not because we didn't put in a good proposal, because we did. It's because there is always way more proposals than there is funds to disperse. The only thing that's good this year is they didn't disperse any funds last year, so they have double to give away. So it could help us. We won't know for a while. And then we have to then go through a competition process. So if we're invited, then we have to go and present in person in front of a selection committee. It's quite a process.
And do they ever give art grants or? do they-
Yeah, they may say, we can only give you this much.
Questions for administrator report? Council comments, final comments. We go home.
I just want to say, I think everybody did a really good job handling the annexation. And that's a big, long project, a tough decision. And, I think there's really good questions and concerns brought up that I hope everybody on the council feels they were heard and feel at least good about that moving forward. So I know long-term, I'm excited for what it'll bring to the city as a whole, but right now it probably doesn't feel good to everybody, but ultimately I think we made the right decision, I think. So I appreciate all the input and good questions. So thank you all.
It's a lot. And that's anywhere, everywhere in our world, and that makes it doubly hard.
It's been a tough process trying to educate ourselves and learn from the hard lessons we've had on previous planning. And you can plan and plan and plan and spend lots of money on consultants to try to do everything right. And then somebody comes in and says, hey, did you think of this? Or, hey, I want to do this. And it's like, we missed it. I think with our master planning process, I think with our citizen advocacy, that's the biggest one. And the knowledge of our planning commission and our counselors, I keep my fingers crossed that the development will be good development, they'll be good neighbors, and they will provide that economic base that was planned for so many years ago, 14 years ago, I think it was. So yes, I'm apprehensive, but I'm hopeful. And like Councillor Blaine said, it's a lot of hard work and I appreciate the effort and I appreciate the input and the discussion. The one guy told me a long time ago, he was a city councilor, he said there was nothing worse than herding a bunch of sheep that as soon as one person voted, everybody else voted the same way. I'm glad to hear that we don't have that. We don't have a bunch of sheep. We ask tough questions, we make our statements, and we move forward. And I appreciate that strength. I appreciate the honesty, and that's what makes things happen around here. That's why we have a good city. So I agree with Councillor Blaine. I thank all of you and the hard work, and the staff is incredible. The capacity that we're at right now and the things that we're doing is just amazing. And I fear that we're carrying too much. So I'm trying to help the staff keep the load down, and we all need to consider that. In the meantime, we're
One question in the administrator's report. Did you get enough input back from council on the COLA options? How will that? Okay. Okay.
Chief,
Just a reminder that this Saturday is October Community Shred Day from 10 to 2. And then the 30th of April is the DEA Take Back on a Saturday from 10 to 2. Just a reminder. Scheduled for, I think, July and November. Okay. Let's go.
Apparently he's gonna stand in line waiting.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. All right. Any other comments? Close this hearing at 8:56. Thank you, everybody.
Work.